Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for day number 20 of my 31 Days of Horror. Today's movie is actually a first time watch for myself. It's one that I've had an interest in watching, and I thought, it's about time I just pull the trigger and get around to watching this one because, quite honestly, it's actually sat on my shelf for a while. It's one of Roman Polanski's bigger, horror thrillers, right up there with Rosemary's Baby and The Tenant, of course. But it was actually the first of the three. This is from the year 1965, and today's movie is Repulsion. So before I get into my thoughts of Repulsion and what I got out of it from a first time viewing, I'm going to quickly run into the plot for this one. And honestly, plot wise, it's actually a pretty simple movie. Most of the stuff that you're going to get from a film like Repulsion comes from the themes and reading into the story and what it's saying on a metaphorical level and things like that. But the plot for this one, our lead in this film has a fear, or I guess you could say repulsion, against men. So she starts like having like these delusions, and when she's actually interacting with men, she seems quite uncomfortable. And I'm not really going to say what direction it goes into because once it goes into that direction, that is honestly a big portion of this movie. And like I said, most of what you're going to get from it is reading into the context and what the film's trying to say. So, yeah, we'll get into my thoughts of Repulsion. Like I said, a film by Roman Polanski. This is part of his, I think it's called the Apartment Trilogy, if I remember correctly, and made up of the movies I mentioned before. Rosemary's Baby, I'm massive on. I've done a review of that on my channel before. It's a movie that I've seen plenty of times, and honestly, Rosemary's Baby is like a 10 out of 10 for me. I think it's fantastic. The Tenant, I've only seen the once, but I do really like it. Not quite on Rosemary's Baby level, but another one I really enjoy. And like I said, I was keen to check out Repulsion, and this was a first time watch for myself. And before I get too deep into my thoughts, I will just quickly say a frustrating watch for a first time, if I'm being completely honest. With it being the 31 Days of Horror, there is a bit of a crunch time wise and finding time to fit these in and whatever. So I chucked this one on after getting home from work, and yeah, I was extremely tired. I didn't fall asleep. I watched the movie the whole way through, but I felt myself just sort of nodding off. And it's not the movie's fault or anything. I was actually pretty engaged. Wasn't the movie's problem, but yeah, just not the right circumstance. But I thought I'd just clear that up. Let's get into my thoughts of Repulsion from the year 1965. Like I said in my intro, this is a movie by Roman Polanski, and with this being the earliest of his big three horror thrillers, and again to recap, I'm clumping in Rosemary's Baby and The Tenant in to make it a trilogy with Repulsion. This does feel very early phases of Polanski's style. Of course, it's got great acting and shots and things that you come to expect from his movies, but like tight shots as well. I feel like in a lot of Polanski's movies, there's a lot of moments where like the camera's following someone, and it feels like they just brush past the lens, and I just feel like that is very Polanski to me. Obviously, the apartment setting, making it the apartment trilogy, and now that I think about it, that probably plays into why the tight shots are so common in his films. But again, like the case with most of Polanski's movies for myself, I feel like this is going to be one that gets better upon revisits. It's hard to speak for The Tenant because The Tenant I've only seen once, but Rosemary's Baby, the very first time I saw that movie, I really, really did like it, but it's just gotten to the point where I've watched it over and over and seen it, a handful of times now, where like every little scene I'm finding something new and picking up something that I didn't catch the last time, to a point where Rosemary's Baby has become a 10 out of 10. And I'm not saying Repulsion is going to eventually become a 10 out of 10, but I feel like the more I watch a movie like this one, the more I'm eventually going to get out of it. And like I said, it wasn't the best viewing experience, if I'm being honest, for today's review. But I feel like, coming back to a movie like this one, it's going to be more rewarding the next time I check it out. And to be completely honest and get back to my thoughts of Repulsion, this was a movie that wasn't quite clicking with me. Like I said, it didn't help that I was probably a little bit tired and not really putting it together. The story was pretty straightforward. Like I said, there's not really... it's not too complex story-wise. Most of what you're going to get out of it, like I said, is reading into the themes and metaphors and context and what you take out of it and things like that. And maybe I was overthinking it a little bit too much, and maybe I was picking up on those things but just expecting there to be more that I was getting confused with. But I just, by the end of this movie, I just felt like there was lines and dots that I wasn't quite connecting, and metaphors and such that I just couldn't put together. This movie, like I said, I wasn't bored by it. I was, as I said, sort of nodding off at times. I didn't completely fall asleep, but that just had something to do with the day, not the movie's fault. This is one I'm really excited to get around to on a better circumstance when, like I said, it's not the 31 days and it's not such a time crunch. And because if it was up to me, I wouldn't have come home and chucked on a movie like Repulsion, in the feeling that I was in, being so tired and whatever, but I did. And like I said, this movie is not bad. I think it's just one that I need to eventually come back to and get something more from another time. But I think it's also one, if you have seen this movie, hit me up in the comments. Tell me what to keep an eye out for, whether it's certain scenes or lines or things like that, to sort of maybe help me catch up on things that I may have missed being so tired watching it for this one. So it's a bit of a hard one, and this score is going to be way too low and sort of undeserving, but it's the way I do these reviews. And I can't lie and say, oh, it's a 8 out of 10 when, the viewing experience this time around wasn't an 8 out of 10. So I'm going to give Repulsion from 1965 just a 6 out of 10. It is my least favourite of the Apartment trilogy so far. I just sort of knew going into it wasn't going to touch Rosemary's Baby because I just fucking adore that movie. Tenet, I really like the Tenet, so I was like, it might be around that mark, but I don't know, I think just being too tired a little bit, and maybe I am just overthinking it, and I was picking up everything I was putting down, and maybe it is just a case of, okay, I was just maybe a little bit underwhelmed by it, but it's a good movie, and I do recommend checking it out, especially, if you're a fan of Polanski's style and stuff, because like I said, this is the earliest of the 3 movies that I've been talking about today, and it feels like there is a lot of like early blueprints for his style and what he's doing and things like that. So Repulsion from the year 1965. Like I said, sorry that today's one wasn't too revealing of my thoughts and everything, but like I said, it's one I want to come back to and gather my thoughts again. And I'm sure it's a movie, when I'm going through my collection and talking about things, it's one that will eventually come up again, and hopefully next time my thoughts are a little bit more put together. But thank you for joining me for day number 20, guys, and I appreciate everyone who's been following along and leaving likes, subscribing especially, the comments as well. I've been loving the following along with the comments for the 31 days. But thank you for joining me for day number 20, like I said, and I'll see you tomorrow for day number 21, and I'll be a little bit more awake that time. Thanks, guys.